cloud. Okay, hopefully everything will work this time. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Patreon, or this evening's or afternoons or whatever time of day it is where you are. Sip and chat. I'm going to be working on the dress of woe, the new dress of woe, the Giornea, on which my little new cute little kitten peed. Let me show you the cutie. Hello, baby. Yeah, this is my little pisser. Yes, she is adorable, but she likes to pee wherever she happens to be when she's playing. And of course, she'll only pee on fabric because, you know, you just don't pee just anywhere. So she broke into our craft room where we have all the fabric. And unfortunately, the train of the Giornea was on the ground, even though the Giornea was hanging up. And so she went right for it and peed on it. Thankfully, because she's just a little kitten, because she's only about 7 weeks old, we think, her urine doesn't really smell that bad yet. So yay, I guess. Anyway, so little baby, I'm going to let you take your nap now, and I'm going to work on the thing on which you peed. So now I need to finish it so that I can actually take it to the cleaners. So little baby. Yeah. So that means that I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to finish this Giornea, this garment that I actually started 5 years ago, if you can believe that. I cannot really believe that, but there it is. And I hopefully then will be wearing it at this coming Penzic. Yeah, so exciting times in the household of the Contessa. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so this Giornea is silk damask. And for those who are watching this as a recording, you'll notice we have 2 cameras. I've got my sewing camera and then the straight ahead camera for those who just want to observe me from the front. But if you'd actually like to see what I'm doing when I'm sewing, then you can watch my hands do their thing. So yeah, we have a rescue kitten now, and that was not planned at all. There are 2 cats, 2 mama cats in our apartment complex, and I'm going to see if we can maybe try to catch them after they finished with this 2 litters of kittens they have, and get them spayed and then release them back out into the wilds of the city, because we can't take on any more cats. We already had our 2 rescue cats from the autumn, and then we ended up with this kitten because my condottiero was coming home one day from work, and he liked to look at the kittens. They're adorable, of course. And he noticed one kitten, and he thought it was dead at first, and it was laying on its side, and it was covered in flies. And he thought, oh, that poor thing. But then the poor thing twitched, and he realized it was still barely alive. So he took this husk of a poor kitten covered in flies and rushed him to our local vet. And the local vet did everything they could. They immediately took this poor little kitten back, and they pumped her full of every kind of thing that could possibly save her life. But unfortunately, she was too far gone. She had maggots in her stomach and in her esophagus, and the damage done by them was just beyond repair at that point. So she did die more comfortably than she would have in the heat and dirt of the undercarriage of our apartment complex, but she did die. The vet called us a couple of hours later and said she had passed. Well, that made my husband very, very sad. And he went down to show me where he had found that kitten. And then we saw another kitten that looked very much like that kitten. Isaac, what are you doing? No, it's okay. I have a whole Kitties of the Palace channel, by the way. If you want more kitten content, feel free to go there and check it out. You can see my new kitten and our other rescue kitties and how they're getting on. Anyway, we went and saw that there was another kitten that looked very similar to the first kitten, dehydrated and malnourished, but not yet a twitching husk on its side being eaten alive by flies. But we realized that if we didn't intervene, this poor little thing was going to end up like its sibling. And so we took the kitten to the vet. We had her checked out. She was dehydrated and malnourished, but otherwise seemed to be fine. So we took her in and started feeding her and hydrating her and taking care of her. And the first weekend was very intense. She literally just ate and slept and ate and slept. And she slept on my condottiero's chest right here. And then we were very concerned about this and that. So we took her to the emergency vet because we thought she wasn't pooping properly, but apparently kittens of that age just have big puffy bellies when they've actually had food. And she recovered and she became a very cute, energetic kitten. But after that weekend of intense caring, my husband's rhetoric went from "we need to find her another home" to "she's ours now." So now we have an ornery little kitten who is literally giving my two other rescue cats a run for their money by chasing them all over the apartment. And I will admit that they let her chase them. They have choices. They're way bigger than she is. They could stop her if they really wanted, but apparently they enjoy interacting with this little thing. At first, they of course were not very fond of her. In fact, at first, there was hissing and fleeing and general disapprobation, but there's approbation now, and it's a very happy little threesome. Except that now the little kitten has taken to just sort of urinating wherever she wants. She does use the litter box. She knows how to use the litter box, but what we've noticed is that he will squat and pee wherever she is playing. She won't stop, go back to a litter box, and then resume play. No, no, no. She just squats and pees wherever she may be. So we're going to try putting litter boxes around the apartment and see how that goes. If you just heard that sound, that was my youngest son trying to take one of the rescue cats in to show you, and apparently Chimi was not having any of it. Did you get scratched badly? Ah, yes. So I am working on the neckline of this Giornea. And I'm glad I actually waited as long as I did, because it allowed me to learn some things about the extant Giornea of Diego di Cavaniglia that I could then apply to finishing this Giornea. Even though this is a woman's Giornea, his Giornea is a man's Giornea, it doesn't matter. The construction is the same. I'm pretty certain there would not be any difference in technique, finishing techniques, sewing techniques, etc. And his Giornea is finished with a facing of the same fabric, of the shell fabric. And so that facing actually goes over the lining. And that's actually pretty clever on several fronts. One, it means that your lining, if the Giornea flexes or whatever, the thing you see when the neckline flexes open is more of the expensive outer fabric. It's also a clever use probably of scraps from the cutting process, from laying the garment out and cutting it. And so I did the same thing. I found some pretty slender scraps left over from cutting the Giornea, and I've used it for the facing. And I treated this a bit like piping. If any of you have done piping, that's kind of the technique I used. So it's already, you can see it's already finished on the outside like that, on the front. And then I've turned the facing and am now blind stitching it down to the lining. So I'm only going through the lining. I'm not going through the shell as much as possible. That's my goal. So yeah, maybe we'll get this done in time for Penzik this year, since I don't have any other new garment projects. I do want to apply some fur trim to my the hem of one of my Burgundian gowns, one of my robe, my gowness, as they would say in the 15th century. Isaac, stop. It's okay. Stop torturing Timmy. If my viewers wish to see my kitties, they can go to Kitties of the Palace. And if any of the kitties decide to make a cameo, that's cool too. Your trunks are hanging up on the drying rack, kiddo. Or they're out there somewhere. I put them out there so that they would dry rather than leaving them on the table and staining it with chlorine. Children. So let's see, other projects I have in the offing currently that are actually underway. Still working on the farsetto and Giornea for my condottiero. And I honestly, we haven't done anything on that since last summer. So any of the videos you've seen on that, those are all from, it's footage from last summer. It's been a rough season in our household, on not the medievalist front, but on the real life front. And it's just when things are just kind of constantly stressful and stressful and stressful and stressful, and you just don't, it sucks my energy away. And so I end up having limited energy, and that usually ends up having to be devoted to things like housekeeping and cooking and whatnot. So I haven't really had much creative, and creative energy is a special kind of energy. You can't just, yeah. And unfortunately, chronic stress seems to eat my creative energy. So yeah, we haven't really gotten much done on garments or medieval kit in the last, probably since October, actually, because I mean, I did finally finish the Gamora, the pink wool Gamora, right? And hopefully the 2 final videos on that will be coming out in the next couple of days. The hopefully second to last video will be coming out today. I have finished it. I just need my condottiero to review it, or my youngest stepson to review it and make sure there's nothing obviously wrong with it. And so I did finish the pink wool Gamora, but I contracted RSV in October after we went to Thailand. And then I got the flu right after I recovered from RSV over Thanksgiving. And I was sick. I was coughing, like hacking, coughing, exhausted for months. And then we also got really terrible news in October from my husband's career that tossed our lives into a chaos of misery and uncertainty. And so like, I still don't know where I'm going to be living September 1st. Isn't that fun? Yeah, it's now, in case you're watching this video as a recording, it is now June 27th, and I don't know where I will be living, on which continent. I don't know if my husband will have a job as of September 1st. So that's our exciting lives right now. And kind of chronic stress just really eats you alive, and it really sucked my energy away. So yeah, that's why I haven't really gotten much done. And there's a lot of things I started last year. Most of the things that are currently ongoing, I started all of the things that are ongoing. I started at least last year, or in the case of this Giornea, I started, 5 years ago, actually. It's been, ladies and gentlemen, basically since 2016, we've been riding a roller coaster of uncertainty and stress, and be nice if we could just get over this hump and have some certainty. Anyway, so the other thing, after I get this done, I'm going to work on applying the fur to my pink gown, my pink Burgundian gown, the one that I'm wearing in the Dressing the Burgundian Contessa series. And so the fur trim on the hem, it's an immense amount of, I mean, it's a long hem because it's got a long train. So I might get that done in time to actually wear it at some point during Penzik. That would certainly be nice. I'm not super optimistic, but it could happen. I want to take the gown. I need to take the gown to the cleaners first and have them give it a proper thorough cleaning. There's a lot of stains on it from years of body oils, and I don't expect all of the stains to come out. A lot of it is actually just kind of schmutz from the air bonding with the oils from my skin and just kind of making it look sort of unfresh. And the medieval thing to do, if I wanted to have no life at all, the medieval thing to do would be to actually turn it, because I think that satin is two-sided. I think it's two-sided. Might not be though. If it's two-sided, then what I should do, honestly, is pick all the seams apart take it apart, flip it, and then resew it. That would be the authentic thing to do for a gown that is looking a little tired on the outside. That is actually what used to be done, because, you know, in the 15th century, in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance even, labor was relatively cheap. The materials were what cost a lot of money. So it's really inexpensive to send your gown to a seamstress, and actually a seamer or a seamstress, literally the people who actually do the sewing, not a tailor. A tailor is the person who handles the design and the measuring and the drafting and the construction, like that. That's the tailor. The seamer or the seamster, a female seamer, are the ones who actually do the physical sewing. And so you would actually send your garments to a seamster, and she would handle the flipping. She would pick it apart. She would flip it. She would reassemble it and do all the sewing, put it back together again, inside out. Of course, I am the seamster, or the seamstress, sorry. The seamer or the seamstress, not seamster, sorry. Seamstress, yeah. It's what we call them now. But at the time, the female seamers were seamsters. And that is because in Middle English, you added ER was the name, was added to the profession for the person doing the job if they were male. So a fuller is a man who does the fulling of wool, right? Or a tucker is a man who does the tucking, which is also a kind of fulling of wool. But a tuckster would be a woman who is a professional tucker, right? So a backster is a professional female baker, for instance. A brewster is a female brewer. So if you have the last name of Brewster, you are descended from a female brewer at some point, and probably possibly a female brewer who maybe didn't have a husband when your ancestor was born. And therefore her name was the one that got passed down. So yeah, seamsters, or seamstresses as we call them now, would have been the ones who would have picked apart the seams and flipped all the fabric and put it back together on the other side, all refreshed and new looking. But that, of course, only works for two-sided fabric. If it's a one-sided satin, then the back side is, you know, not going to be nearly as pretty as the front side. That being said, the front side of this particular satin gown is so dull at this point that I think just the not stained, less worn looking, but still duller underside would be better than the top side, which if you look pretty closely, it's, yeah. That being said, I'm not certain if I'm excited about investing another 100 hours of sewing for all those seams. And I mean, it's not just sewing the seams. The process of picking seams apart is laborious. And I don't know about you, but I get pretty, sorry, I need to remember to keep this back a little further for the camera. I don't know about you, but it's soul sucking to undo your own handwork, right? Undoing machine work is frustrating, but it doesn't, like, I don't get emotionally invested in it because honestly, a machine seam doesn't take that long. But undoing a hand seam, that feels literally like throwing away big chunks of my life. It is the physical representation of a waste of time. And so, you know, that just completely kills my forward momentum. So if I ever have a thing, this is my technique. If you ever have to have a hand done seam picked out, your own hand done sewing, if it needs to be removed, ask someone else to do it for you. Because they won't have any emotional investment in undoing your work, whereas you will. So if they undo your work, it will impact you less and have less of a deleterious impact on your creative momentum. So I always use my condottiero as my seam picker. Usually if we're watching some Netflix series or something, I'll hand him the garment and say, please pick out that seam. That's how I roll. little survival techniques for coping with the emotional stress of hand sewing garments. So I'm still pondering, and I think that's probably one of the reasons on the pink burgundian gown that I haven't actually gotten around to applying the fur trim at the bottom, because I'm concerned that there isn't much life left in the gown in its current state, that in terms of how shabby the silk has become over 10 years of some seriously hard use and in a lot of dusty areas and outdoors a lot, that there isn't actually that much life left in it. And so is it worth applying fur and like 10 yards, about 7 yards of um, fur guard to the bottom if it's not going to be, long for use in its current state? So I guess that's been what's holding me back. And I keep saying, oh, well, I'll get around to making a new burgundian gown, but my creative output has been pretty spotty over the last couple of years because of all of this chronic stress in our lives. So it's, yeah, saying, well, I'll just make a new gown, that's all fine and well. But I think we all know that when you make a new gown, especially one where the pattern on the last one wasn't exactly great and I had to basically completely reconstruct it after making the garment, another example of picking the seams and starting from scratch. And so I still have to actually do some fitting on the pattern that I created for my Burgundian style gowns. And that's kind of also holding me back, because the last two that I made, both of them, plus three that I made, one of them was okay. The most recent one, that's the red and gold one, but unfortunately I didn't fit it over top of a kirtle. So it doesn't fit. So the kirtles always end up popping out. You always end up seeing the kirtle neckline unless I pin it into the sleeves. And the other two I made before that, both of them have to be reconstructed. I reconstructed the pink one. The yellow gown with the black dragons on it is one probably most of you have never seen, because I have to completely reconstruct the shoulders and neckline area and sleeve on that. And that's a process. That is one hell of a process. So that's why I also haven't started any new Burgundian gowns, because to get the right look for that, to get the fitted Margaret of York look, which is my preferred Burgundian style, I really need to reconsider my treatment of the neckline and collar, because thus far I've done it as a turnback collar, which means you need some seriously complex construction and tailoring around the shoulder area and the neckline and the back and the front to get everything to lay right. Think of a modern suit jacket, right? The way you have the turnback collar, that's a turnback collar. That collar is not sewn on. And so that requires some real serious proper tailoring to get everything to lay fully. And I don't have a dress dummy. And even if I did, dress dummies wouldn't fit my body. I'd have to actually make a custom dress dummy because I am very asymmetrical. And I definitely I have a rib cage that kind of bulges out. It's not a straight line from under my breast to my waist. It's kind of rounded. And that's not through corset training or any such nonsense. That's just my rib cage. So dress dummies aren't designed for that. Dress dummies always have a kind of straight line from the bust to the waist. And that's not me. This is me. So I would need to make a custom dress dummy just for my body type. And so that just makes all things like fitting and patterning much more complicated than if I had a proper dress dummy to do it. Yeah. Anyway, that's why I haven't made a move to make a new Burgundian gown, even though I have amassed multiple fabrics that I've specifically set aside for gowns, for glorious Margaret of York style gowns or Mary of Burgundy style gowns. And that's why none of them have have been turned into any of that. Like this, I have more of this damask right here that I would like to turn into a gown, or maybe a kirtle, but probably a gown. And I need to actually work on the pattern, and patterning and pattern creation is especially energy intensive. So that means I have doubly not made a move on any of the Burgundian gowns, because that requires serious focus and energy. And we've moved around so much, and I've been a digital nomad now for the last couple of years. I'm basically only a visitor here in Korea. So given all of those realities, I just haven't had the time and energy to devote to. What are you doing? Why? No. Oh, kitty down. My kitties are ornery. Anyway, I haven't had the time and energy to devote to seriously brain intensive creative activities like that, because drafting, it's you need to have the time and the energy. And with my condottiero moving around so much following the orders of the king's army, I've basically had to help him set up household, like since 2017. He has moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, 6 times since 2017. We have had to set up a new household, had to pack and unpack boxes, figure out where everything can go, figure out what we need in this new place, because often our things have been put in storage because he's being shipped abroad, and I'm kind of just living in sort of a more minimal setting. And so we've had to pack and unpack and pack and unpack and figure out how our things or his things will fit in a new space. And I'm not good with spatial organization. I'm really not. It is not my forte. And so it takes so much energy for me to look at a pile of belongings, say clothes, and look at the storage system available, a closet, new set of drawers, whatever, and figure out how all of those can systematically and sensibly fit in a new space. And it is. So I've had to spend a lot of the last 7 years figuring out. Since 2016, actually, we've moved 9 times. So since 2016, and actually since 2014, we've just been bouncing around all over the place. Every 1 to 2 years, we're in a new place. So that has just that process of unpacking in a new space and figuring out how everything will fit in this new space, when the belongings we had were bought to fit a previous space that never really fit because we didn't have much time in that previous space. So yeah, it means my productivity has not been super high. I was trying to think why. Like, I was thinking about my life, my creative life in general. I'm like, I used to crank out new garments all the time. And I used to use a sewing machine a lot more. But even then, I used to multiple new garments a year for myself and my beau, whoever was my beau in that moment, my husband of the moment. I'm on number 2. And I was trying to figure out why my output has decreased so much. And it's because the stress of living this military lifestyle has really sucked up the energy. Whereas before that, I was 10 years in one apartment in Germany, right? Same place, not packing and unpacking all the time, not having to figure out how things would fit in this new space. I was in the same space. I changed jobs a couple of times, but not terribly frequently. And so, the pattern of my life was consistent and enough for long enough that I could build the momentum up to just keep this creative output going. And man, I'll tell you, the last 10 years have just really killed that creative output. Yeah. Okay, well, that's a depressing topic. Let's move on to other happy topics. Interesting things I have read about lately. Let's see. I meant to write up a list because I've been, reading so much lately that it's kind of going into long-term storage almost immediately. So that means it's not there in ready access memory. Oh yeah, that's right. So I was reading up on the topic of measuring tapes, because obviously, or maybe not obviously, but obviously to me, you know, measuring tapes have not always existed. How the actual techniques of tailoring fascinate me. So figuring out, interesting. I seem to have a spare thread here. No, that's that. Oh, I see. Okay. Could have just continued on with that, but okay, I'm just going to cut this. This is a silk thread. I'm not going to let that go to waste. So tailoring techniques, you know, I'm always seeking to understand the actual medieval tailoring process, how patterns work, what kind of patterns they had. Did they use patterns? How were measurements taken? How were measurements recorded? How were they kept? You know, obviously the equipment of tailoring is also interesting. The scissors you see in the imagery are always, you know, a little, how shall we put this? You know, they always look either huge, they look huge and they look clunky. And so you ask yourself, well, are those, you know, how did those scissors cut? How sharp were they? Were they really effective? Were they good at handling these very expensive, high quality fabrics? You know, those sorts of questions I ask myself. But lately I've gotten on the kick of measurements and how measurements were taken. And it, you know, I haven't been able to find out any primary source information before the 16th century about measurements and measurement taking, which is kind of frustrating. But I have been able to find information about, I'm going to keep talking, I have to go get some more pins, information about 16th century tailoring techniques, because in the 16th century, as with many aspects of, you know, pragmatic aspects of life, the 16th century, you start seeing tailoring books. And you have them in Italy, you have them in Spain, and you have them in Germany. I haven't found any for France or England. And I haven't gotten to look at the Italian one since I was in college, Il Libro del Sarto, the book of the tailor. At that time, I wasn't looking at it for tailoring techniques. So I sadly do not have, I can't say what that says about tailoring techniques in specifically in Italy. It was a pattern book for certain. It was basically a catalog for customers to show them the things that this tailor's shop could produce for them, including amazing tournament pavilions and pavilion encampments. But the Spanish tailoring books I have gotten to look at. Spanish, and they're written in Castilian because at that point, Castellano was the official language of Spain. Yay, Castilian supremacy. And so the Spanish government commissioned these books, and they were specifically intended to regulate the amount of fabric going into these garments, right? Because there was, you know, a big boom in Spain in the 16th century. And so there was an issue with overconsumption. And the tailoring books actually specify this system that modern people are calling the bara system, but bara just was their yard, right? It was like a braccia in Italian or an L in English or German. And so basically I found out what tailors in Spain did is they would use tapes of fabric or parchment. I can't seem to get details on whether it was vellum or paper or fabric tapes that they were using, but they would use these tapes to take measurements, all the pertinent measurements, and they wouldn't actually write down the number. It wasn't about the number. These tapes were not demarcated or metered with measurements as such, but they were literally taking the circumferences of various parts and the distances between those circumferences, and they would mark them in this particular system on this tape, all on one tape, all for one specific customer. And then those markings, those lengths would then be used to draft a pattern. And that pattern it's all about ratios and proportions. Now, obviously, and then, well, so then on the pattern that's in the book, it actually, the markings on the pattern correspond with the markings on the tape. And so as you're drafting this thing, that, well, you have this length from the tape, and that measurement, that length should go from point A to point B. And then this measurement should go from point A to point C, and you just lay out all your points, and then you connect the dots. And obviously a little bit of eyeballing for the curves. And so that was how they took measurements in 16th century Spain. And I haven't looked at the German tailoring books, so I don't know if the German tailoring books talk about how to take measurements or not, or how to record the measurements. So, but I could see that would be a very good way, a very clever way of, in a low tech way, a low material way of taking measurements even before the 16th century, because, you have chalk, you have ink, pens with ink, which are, recommended, are used hugely in the book of, in the Cennino Cennini's book of the craftsman's handbook, right? And so he talks about using ink to mark out lines on things, like to actually take a pen and ink and mark out lines on fabric if you're doing embroidery. So I could absolutely see using a quill and ink to note down the measurements on a strip of fabric way before the 16th century. There's no reason that would have had to, that itself would have been innovative, or had to have been innovative in the 16th century. So yeah, that was an interesting discovery for me recently. And it's funny, it shouldn't have been a recent discovery. This isn't like new information for people who are in the 16th century tailoring biz. But it was new to me because I haven't really looked much at 16th century resources lately, because I haven't had to, because I haven't done much 16th century. I haven't done any 16th century garments since 2012, when I needed to make some Elizabethan clothes for an Elizabethan themed ball on a cruise on Cunard's Queen Elizabeth, where I made 1560s Italian garments for us. So, and at that point, I don't think the bara system had really been explored the way it has now. And it's not called the bara system in the manual. That's just what it's referred to, the measurements of the bara. Because, it's basically laid out on this tape that's 32 inches or 32 or 33 inches long by modern standards. And then, all the measurements are marked on that. And I guess at that time, people weren't generally circumferenced more in any dimension than 32 inches, but that seems kind of weird, because there were certainly gentlemen with muscular chests, so I'm not certain about that. But oh wait, actually, now that I think about it, that tape might actually only, because it's the way the tape is divided in the bara system, it's divided into the circumferences are taken half and quarter and a sixth and an eighth and a 12th. You might not actually take the whole circumference. You might just be taking half circumferences, in which case, yeah, 32 inches would be enough for pretty much anyone who lived in the 16th century for a half of their chest measurement, for instance. So maybe that's, I just recently looked into this, and I haven't had a chance to actually explore it in more depth. So that might actually be, you might not actually take a full circumference. You might only be taking half circumferences. Interesting. But that's one of my latest discoveries. And that taking measurements that way makes total sense from a 15th century perspective, because, you take a measurement and you mark it on the tape right there. And then you don't have to worry about having a piece of paper that may or may not get lost. And then you just keep all your tapes, your various tapes, in a chest, right? I could see a tailor having a chest for each family, because, usually tailors worked for the whole family, and so they wouldn't have just one set of garments. They would be making garments for the entire household. So in terms of storage, I could see maybe a tailor having a separate chest for the tapes, a small chest, a little coffer chest, right? Having a separate, I forgot to wax this silk and it's knotted on itself. Having a separate coffer for each family with the family's tapes just kind of stored there. And then anytime the family commissions a new garment, they just pull from those tapes, assuming maybe that there hasn't been much change in body size. When I washed my hands before this, and there's still grime on them that's getting on the white thread. Let me go ahead and wax my thread now. Sorry, I was talking and forgot to wax my thread. And if you don't wax your thread, then it will not. Okay. Now, hopefully it won't knot on itself so badly. So that was an interesting discovery for me in preparing the script for the upcoming Gamora vlog, or the upcoming soon to be released Gamora vlog. And then sometimes trying to not catch the shell is very annoying. And it usually has to do with the pin being too close to the line of stitching and actually sort of holding the shell to the lining, making it harder to get in that interstitial gap. Now the facing on which this is based for Diego di Cavaniglia's Giornea, unfortunately, when they opened his tomb and pulled out the brown mildewed wads of fabric that turned out to be his garments, the seams had largely deteriorated on all of the garments. And so the facing had come away from the Giornea. It was a separate little wad. So, we don't necessarily know as much about the stitches that were used. You can, there are holes. But, there's multiple kinds of stitches that can create the same looking holes. Holes are holes. So, I don't know if a blind stitch was used because I'm using a blind stitch. Specifically because I'm trying to minimize the amount of thread that is exposed. A whip stitch obviously would be oodles faster than a blind stitch. But, a blind stitch protects the thread a lot more and means that the thread is less likely to wear down and will therefore last longer. Whereas a whip stitch, more of the fabric is exposed or more of the thread is exposed to, rubbing against my garments, basically, is what the exposure would be in that case. Dangling thread here. So, maybe a blind stitch was used to secure the turned facing to the lining. And actually, I'm not even certain whether the facing was turned or not. It might not have been. Obviously, the pictures I've seen, it's just kind of laid out flat. It still has the roll actually from where it was here along the neckline. That is still in place. That bit of stitching and seam that's still in place, but this part of the facing is completely flat now. But I haven't been able to find a report that's detailed enough to tell me if there are stitch holes or if it looks like it was folded at some point, right? Unfortunately, as far as I understand it, the archaeologist who originally handled the process has unfortunately passed on. She was rather elderly when she did the original restoration work, examination and restoration work. And I haven't been able to get details from other people who have worked with the garments, those kind of details like Paola Fabri, whether she remembers if there was evidence of that being folded or not. She worked on the farsetto. I don't think a reconstruction has been done of the Giornea, just a reconstruction of the farsetto. And obviously the original farsetto was put back together, but I would like to get many reasons I'd like to go back to Italy, but one of the reasons is I'd like to actually do my extant garments tour of Italy, where I go to the monastery a Faloni, I forget which saint this, but it's down in the south. Diego's garments are in the south, in Cavagnalia, basically. And I would like to go to the monastery and see the original garments and see if I can get an appointment to actually look at the original garments. Yeah, that's down in the south. That's like almost, that's almost to the Straits of Messina, basically. It is the Straits of Messina, in fact. So it's definitely not close to the parts of Italy that I usually visit, but that's okay. It's good to see. I like seeing new stuff. The south of Italy is so different from the north of Italy, just in many, many, many ways. Actually, my family, my Italian family, the Plastina, they are from that part of the world. So I could tie that in with visiting some of my third, second, and third and fourth cousins. Because my grandfather was 100% Italian from that part of the world. Apparently Plastina is actually a Greek name. So they were actually originally Greeks who came over to Italy. And for all I know, they might have come over during the Ottoman Empire, or they might have come, or during the fall of Constantinople, or they might have come over later when the Ottomans still controlled Greece. But I haven't been able to find out that part of my family history details. So I'd like to go down to that part of Italy and actually see the farsetto and the Giornea and see if I can't get a closer look at them than just looking through the case. And I'd like to also, go and see some other garments. I've been to, excuse me, my nose itches. I've been to San Domenico Maggiore, which is a church in Naples that has a lot of extant garments that you can literally, they're in drawers and you can open up the drawers and look at them. I mean, they're behind glass. You can't touch them. You can open the drawers and look at these garments. Pretty damned close. And I've seen those. I'd like to go back and take another look now that I have better cameras with better resolution, some more shots of those. And then get to other parts of Italy where there are other extant garments. And yeah, do my extant garment of Italy tour, basically. So if you're interested in joining an extant garment of Italy tour, let me know in the comments if you're watching this as a posted recording. Man, it is so hard sewing with a Band-Aid on my thumb. But you see, on my birthday, dear viewer, last week, I was pairing a nectarine and the kitten did something cute and my attention was drawn away from the nectarine and this really, really sharp paring knife, because all my knives are super sharp. I missed the nectarine and planted it right in my thumb. And it was so sharp that it went into my thumb, bounced out, and went in again in a slightly different spot. So I had two cuts that were hemorrhaging pretty impressively. Actually, I've never had that much blood flowing down my hand before. And blood is thick when there's a lot of it. And so that's still healing. And so I have a Band-Aid on this thumb, and that is making it harder to manipulate fabric. Oh, another knot formed. This silk thread is actually Korean embroidery silk thread. and it really likes to knot on itself, which is annoying. Mm-hmm. Mm, I might. Nope. Okay. Uh, Let's see where that tore. Hmm. I'm not certain where it tore. Oh well. So if we had live participants, of course, this is where I would hope they would chime in with some conversation. Let's see other projects. I'd actually like to do, I think I'm planning at Penzic, I'm planning to do some recordings of me reading from chronicles, medieval chronicles of the era, and maybe some poems and some medieval romances, just to provide some interesting content. I've actually had some requests for ASMR content from me because apparently my voice is soothing and relaxing or whatever. And I thought that might make a nice crossover medieval ASMR. And also, while also offering people a window into the past. You know, chronicles really are, to me, when I read a chronicle documenting some aspect of court life or a tournament or a ball, it's literally to me like opening a window and looking through it and seeing how people lived in the past. So I'm hoping that maybe by doing some nice dynamic readings of out of the past that people will enjoy them and better visualize how the past felt and looked and sounded using, of course, the power of the mind, obviously. Oh, speaking of how the past looked and sounded or didn't, there is Netflix has announced a new Decameron series. People have started asking me my opinion on it. It does not look promising based on the thumbnail that I saw on the promotional poster. I don't know what in God's name the one woman had on her head and the other had bangs. So that's not a good start in my opinion. But also the premise is that it's a bunch of horny nobles out in the countryside, which that's not the Decameron. Boccaccio's Decameron, there are a group of Florentine nobles who fled to the countryside to escape the plague, but then they spend 10 days telling stories. And it's the stories that are the focus. You know, anything about the Decameron should be visualizing the stories, not the frame of the people who are trying to not die of the plague. So it's kind of turned it into this like sex crazed pseudo medieval romp, and that's how it looks anyway. So I'm not particularly optimistic that it's going to be a decent production, either in clothing or in content and substance. So yeah, with my low expectations though, that means it's probably not going to disappoint me. And I'll definitely watch it. And I might do a live watch party or something where you can see my instant reactions to everything. And I'll pause and make comments on the clothing as we go along. Yeah, maybe I'll just have pre-positioned a whole bunch of images on how clothing in the 1350s in Italy actually looked. So you can see, yes, this is what she should be wearing. This is what he should be wearing. You'll notice none of them are wearing that. Yeah. Let's see, other things. Still kind of working on the camera angles, trying to figure out what the best angle to show me sewing is. I guess maybe actually over my shoulder would have been better looking this way. I'll consider that for the YouTube live streams I'm going to do, in which I'm going to try to actually do a collab with one of my ancillary channels and have the collaboration window be the one where I'm actually pointed at me sewing and the main window is looking at me front on. Oh, it is so hard not to catch the front of this shell. It's the pins. It's the pins. It's amazing how long a blind stitch can take. It's amazing how long it can take if I keep having to reseat a Band-Aid. Well, I'm excited about Penzik. I'm excited because this year is not Penzik 50. And I'm hoping actually, and this may sound like sacrilege, but here it is. I'm hoping there will be fewer people. And specifically, I'm hoping there will be fewer people who smoke weed, because last year at Penzik, I felt like I was being smoked out. Like I was just being hotboxed with marijuana smoke, because there were so many people who just, I think they spent their entire Penzik high. I don't know how they didn't, die of THC overdose or something like that, toxicity. It it just stank. Penzik smelled so bad, and the smoke was coming into our encampment. And everywhere we walked, we were bombarded with it. I'm sorry, I'm one of those people who thinks that marijuana is the most disgusting smell on the planet. I would rather smell paper mill smell. I would rather smell manure pile, fermented manure pile. Then, and I know whereof I speak. I used to work in a horse stable for many, many years, mucking out stalls every day. I would rather smell that than marijuana smoke. Yeah. So that's just me. And I understand I am no doubt in the minority here, but I'm hoping that fewer people at Penzik also means more medievalists and fewer people going just to get high and party. Yeah. I don't care. Like, seriously, if you want to drink, if you want to enjoy any number of recreational drugs, that's fine with me until it affects me. And unfortunately, with marijuana, that affects me because I smell the smoke and the smoke is horrible. The same thing with cigarettes. I don't care if other people smoke so much. As long as I don't have to breathe the smoke, then it's fine with me, right? I'm very, very libertarian in that regard. As long as what you do doesn't impact me directly or indirectly, I'm fine with it. That might get me a lot of hate in the comments. Sorry, but that's the way it is. That's how I feel. It's sort of like, be considerate. Like, we had neighbors who, my God, they would wake up at 8 or 9 in the morning, and I swear they hadn't even left their tent yet, and they were already smoking up, and that smoke would just roll into our camp and just hang like this fetid haze. And I get headaches from it. It's not just a question of, oh, I don't like it. It makes me feel sick, physically sick. So I'm a big proponent of edibles for people. I love it when people do edibles because that does not affect me. And now we get to the fussy part, the sort of mitered seam at the shoulder. Now I've put my joints in the wrong place, or not the wrong place, in a different place than they are on Diego de Cavanilla's facing. On his facing, the seams on the facing are actually at the shoulders. On mine, I've done it the other way around. I don't know why. No particular reason. This is just how it ended up going. And it seems to work just fine. So I'm not certain that it matters if you put the joints of your facing at the, in one place or the other. I'm trying to get this to neatly fold and hold flat is not easy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this would definitely go faster if I didn't care about the stitches coming through to the front. It's trying to get it in that interstitial space that's really challenging and fussy. My pretty silk pin cushion, handmade, silk damask or silk brocade by a Korean artisan. Yeah, it wasn't cheap. It was about $70, but it was worth it. I'm always happy to buy fewer things, handmade and quality things from local artisans, and support creative arts rather than buy lots of things cheap. Right? I guess we pick where we spend our money. For instance, we only ever buy used cars, and we don't have two cars. I've in my entire adult life, I've never lived in a two-car household. Always had one car between us. And you know what? It works. You can live a one-car lifestyle. You just have to plan differently. It's like people get spoiled if you have like 4 cars for a 3-person family, but you don't need that. And it is actually possible to thrive, even in America, with only one car. You just have to plan more carefully. So, we only ever have used cars. So, we save our money and spend it on spend money on cars and instead, use it on other things. So I would rather have nice handmade items and fewer of them than have a car, have new cars and more than one car. I'm a bit of a heretical American because I don't like cars in general, and I don't like the fact that America has now been reshaped by Henry Ford to be a car must country for the most part. I think it's sad that we went from being pretty much a car-free country before Henry Ford to being a situation where you have to have a car or you're trapped. You're stranded. Having lived in so many different places now and traveled in so many different places across the world where they've managed to figure out that you don't have to have a car in order. You can set up systems that allow, you know, people to not have cars and to still be part of economically successful and part of the community. Not going to wander down that aisle though. Moving away from that topic. This year at Penzic, very sad to report, there will be no Casa Bardici, no villa, beautiful Italianate villa on the lake. So I think the lake view is going to be much sadder, much sadder at Penzic, and there will certainly be a dearth of beautiful experiences. So I have to say my afternoon Wednesday ball in the villa and then the Thursday night hoity-toity dancing were some of my most magical Penzic moments. And they will not be even possible this year. So we're going to have to just create other magical moments in other ways. But it will be a very different landscape this year at Penzic, for certain. Okay, so it's all pinned down. Moving on. At Penzic, I'm seriously considering doing some experimental archaeology, looking at some of the recipes in the trotula and trying them out, hair cleansing and that sort of thing. Obviously, I'm going to be avoiding any of the ingredients that are caustic or obviously caustic. I will not be using orpiment, for instance. And I will be eschewing lead and arsenic as ingredients. But yeah, I was hoping to play with some of the trotula's cosmetics and hygiene recipes, and also to play around with some laundry recipes. So there's a 15th century dye manual from Nuremberg that actually has some recipes for cleaning items. And so, at Penzic, we'll have grass, we'll have sun. And those are two major components in the medieval laundry process. And so I think we're going to play with some laundry techniques, and we'll use some of the stain treatments to see how they work. And obviously I'll also be bringing some scraps of fabric, and we'll be running some tests on the scraps first before we apply them to the main garments in question. Most of the garments that we will launder in this fashion in any case are linen undergarments. For the most part, overgarments don't get laundered like that. They get stain treated, they get spot treated. But it would be interesting to use some of the spot treatments on any stains that may have developed. But again, I'll be bringing scraps of the relevant fabrics for the relevant garments, and we'll be running some tests. I was recently reading about snow washing, which I know some of you already know about snow washing, and I kind of knew about it, but I actually read more into the process. and into the process of medieval laundry techniques and practices and techniques. And so with snow laundering, it's a very good technique for wool because one of the problems with wool and laundering it with water and soap and agitation is that, of course, it causes fulling. It causes the fibers to literally shrink around themselves and to permanently get smaller. But the ice is cold, so you have no warmth, or the snow is frozen and it's cold. And, it's not messy because it's frozen, so it's easy to use it to scrub. And so you actually put the garment in the snow, leave it out there in the snow for a certain amount of time, and then you go and you actually rub the snow through it gently. And that actually will get smells and dirt out of the garment, because then the water will just melt through and it will come out. It will take the kind of the dirt and whatnot with it. And of course, that process does not remove any of the oils that are left in the wool. So it doesn't dry it out and make it more fragile. And apparently with other laundering techniques, the same idea kind of applies. The reason that they used to beat linen garments isn't, contrary to popular belief, to kill the lice in them. It was to beat the stain treating through the fibers, to actually literally mechanically force the stain treatment, the chemical stain treatment, into the fibers, into the stains, to actually get it to, encompass the staining agent, and then to get it through to the other side. That's why they actually beat garments. It wasn't it wasn't about killing lice or mites or whatever. And so I'm excited to try that technique on some of my linen under things. I need to get a beetle, actually get a beater. But I think I should be able to do that at Pennsic, I hope, or find someone there who can make one for me right there. And yeah, and then try some of these stain treatments, with this kind of violent stain removal technique. Of course, the manuals, don't suggest the violent beating on expensive, more delicate fabrics like silk. Definitely suggest other ways of getting the stain treatment through. But I'm excited to try some things out. We'll also have some cooking equipment this year that we bought last year, and hopefully we can find a fire where we can experiment with some of our fun, or the equipment we bought last year. Nope, that came through to the other side. You're coming full circle to the picking of seams and stitches. And I'm almost done with the facing anyway, and I just have to trim up and finish up those two corners. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I really would like a new pavilion this year for Pennsic. The one I have is kind of small, but also getting rather old, and also has metal infrastructure. I actually wouldn't mind. It was actually designed it packs down into a packet that will actually fit on an airplane. You can actually check it. So I actually wouldn't mind bringing that pavilion to Korea. And then I have a medieval pavilion here that we can set up for medievalist things. But that would definitely require me getting a replacement for Pennsic, which is actually where I spend most of my medievalist time these days, is at Pennsic. The 2 weeks there is, we spend most of our time remotely from mainland medievalism of any kind. So yeah, it's the pin again. Sorry, trying to figure out what the best for where I actually hold where I actually hold things. And I just realized that that camera is rotated the wrong way. Of course it is. Sorry, guys. And I can't seem to make it rotate. I'll have to figure that out for next time. It insists on it being in that direction instead of, I'll have to see next time. Almost done. Ugh, might not have enough thread to actually get down all the way there. That's annoying. Once again, caught the shell. Nope, I do not have enough thread to get all the way down there. Ugh. Oh, hashtag Contessa world problems. I've also been doing research for the rings and badges videos that I'll be producing. Some very fascinating things about magic rings in the Middle Ages, and that as they appear in Arthurian romances, which is of course the place from which Tolkien got his inspiration for magic rings, was the Arthurian romances that he so loved. Okay, well, there, the neckline is almost done. I just have to decide how I'm going to miter these edges, these corners, these two corners, and finish them up. And yeah, then all I have to do is apply the facing to the train. And I'm going to be doing the same facing that I did on I put it away on Osana, on my pink Gamora, same technique. So that means there will be a band that is going to be the thing taking detachable, replaceable band that will be taking all the drag on the hem instead of the actual lining or the shell of the garment itself. Yeah, I'm all about rehemming these days. Designing garments to be rehemmed is the way to go. And it seems to have been, that was another interesting discovery before we part ways. Rehemming, I actually read in the inventories or the expense accounts of Edward II that Isabella, his queen, the she-wolf of France, she actually had garments sent for rehemming. And so what that means is that could mean that they just put a new hem in, like the hem had fallen. But I think it might also mean that they literally removed damaged fabric from the bottom and attached a strip of good fabric to the bottom. And so that leads the credence to the idea of, especially if her gown, or if her gown was actually, if the bottom was faced, then rehemming would mean to replace the dilapidated facing and put new facing on, right? So that is the archaeological evidence in the 15th and 16th century in Italy, is this facing thing. So I don't see any reason why that couldn't have been the technique applied all throughout Europe. Unfortunately, the number of gowns, full-length gowns with intact hems, there's I can't think of any offhand. The Greenland gowns are not, they're not, I would never use those as a basis for mainland European tailoring techniques, because Greenland was this isolated colony and they obviously had very little access to new fabrics, new cloth, and they were living a different kind of life. So I wouldn't necessarily use that as a basis for mainland European clothing and sewing techniques and tailoring techniques. I don't think of any of those. I haven't done an extensive study, but I can't think of seeing facing on any of them. I also can't think specifically of how the hems were done or if the hems were intact or not. Anyway, okay, thank you all for joining me for this sip and stitch as a recording, I guess. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, until next time, guys, may you, sorry, I was about to say, may your travels be creative and unplanned. Until next time, guys, stay creative. Have a great day, afternoon, morning, evening, whatever it is. Bye, everyone. And now you get to see me walk towards the camera.